Seth, I want to hold up a couple of papers for our audience this morning because it's not just that Boeing is on the cover of the business pages. New York Times, Boeing CEO had warning before second crash. Wall Street Journal, senators pressure Boeing's chief on handling of the 737 MAX crisis. And I think probably the most powerful is the New York Post, which is the CEO looking back at the family members of some of those killed, saying, look at us and see you're sorry. Boeing not just on the business pages as well, but the stock actually higher so far this week. Do you feel that somehow Boeing is managing its way through this crisis, or is this more the measure of the fact that it's really a duopoly? If you want to buy an airplane, there's really two companies that you can go to.
That's a big part of it, Brian. Yeah, I think investors just trying to make sure that there are no new surprises. They knew Muilenberg was going to take a beating yesterday in the Senate. He did. He'll take another one today in the House. But yeah, when you look back at past corporate crises and you try to draw parallels, people say, oh, what about Chipotle? It is different because, if you don't want to eat at Chipotle after all that happened, there are countless other places to eat, right? Whereas there are only two places to buy big aircraft, Boeing and of course, Airbus. And it's not even that simple for a lot of airlines. If you're Southwest Airlines, although Southwest said recently that, who knows if this drags on, it could look elsewhere. And you have, 700, 737s. You really want to believe in Boeing. The other thing, Boeing's not supposed to be a consumer brand. So as you said, when it's on the front page of the paper, not just the business section, that in itself is bad news. Customers aren't supposed to think about what kind of airplane they're on.
Exactly. And that was my point in trying to show that, because customers, though, the aircraft manufacturers don't have much of a choice. Customers have slightly more of a choice. And what I mean by that is, Seth, could you see a situation where if, let's say, you're Delta, and Delta flies a lot of Airbus aircraft, if you're Delta, you're not trying to profit off these terrible tragedies, but you might want to reassure the public and say, hey, we don't fly the 737 MAX, or we haven't flown many of them. We fly this Airbus plane, and therefore you should choose Delta. There is a consumer choice story to this, is it not?
Look, Delta's not going to come out and say that, of course, but it's very glad, right?
And it's cold and
sure,
it's gross.
Sure.
What I'm saying is the public would be aware. They're going to subtly make the public aware, say, I remember this. This is a true story. Again, well, I was in Houston last year or 2 years ago, right before the MAX. United was the last airline in America still flying the MAX. I was booked on a 737 MAX flight. Now, I was going to get on it because I've flown United and 737s for years. But I have to say, it was in my head. Now, they ended up canceling that flight and I got rerouted, but it was in my head.
Absolutely. And Delta is very glad to be the only one of the four giant U.S. airlines without any MAX exposure, American, United, and Southwest being the others. Now, most of that's just because it's not dealing with the operational headaches, right? But on day one, when that plane gets back in the air, there are going to be consumers aware of the fact that, there's the chance of being on the MAX on one of those other airlines, whereas there's not that chance on Delta. And I'm not sure there's anything Boeing or these airlines can say to reassure people. It's just going to take getting the plane back up in the air safely for some period of time for people to move on.
I'm sure you know a lot of pilots. I know a lot of pilots. I've spoken to a couple of pilot friends of mine who work for major American airlines who have flown the 737 MAX. They've talked about the plane. They don't really like it. They say it's kind of jumpy. Do you think there is any chance at all, Seth, that this plane will never fly again? Is that at all any possibility?
I've thought about that, Brian. Is there a non-zero chance of that? It's a good question. It's obviously a very, very small chance, but we have seen, other things happen here that seemed improbable. The idea that we'd be looking at perhaps a year of grounding, which is now very much within the realm of possibility as March comes around here. I suppose anything's possible. It is a different kind of airplane. This was Boeing in the unfortunate position of not being able to do what Airbus did, which was slap new engines on the old airplane and solving sort of a physical issue with technology with MCAS. Is there a non-zero chance? I mean, I don't know. Obviously, it's not the most likely scenario. The most likely scenario remains that at some point this plane gets back up in the air flying safely and people move on.